Can someone explain to me what is going on with the Series X? I'm not even going to talk about the Series S because that's like such a non-issue. We all knew because of the really poor GPU power um, and the horrible memory bandwidth that wasn't going to be any kind of competition. But we're starting to see more and more third-party games crop up and literally be like fucking way more performant on the PlayStation 5, despite the fact that there is a about a 2 teraflop difference um, in between these two consoles. It's been known that the PlayStation 5 secret sauce, if you will, is it's really catered to the IO systems that they have in there, and a lot of the cache systems that they have to scrub any type of latency and things of that nature. Um, Mark Cerny actually came out and was like, "Yo, it's dangerous to kind of use that teraflop number," and it's always been dangerous talking about numbers. I mean, you have way back in the day the 32 bit consoles versus 64-bit consoles, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, just to let you know, the Dreamcast and the PS2 was actually 128-bit consoles, whereas the original Xbox, was 32-bit, and yet the original Xbox could churn out some really, really cool looking games. Um, there's a lot more going on to it, with the story, and it is very curious. So this first part of the video, I want to actually kind of really see what is the problem. What is the problem? What are the rumors? What are the things that people are saying as to why it's been, what are the issues? So the first thing I do want to tackle in this video is um, what are the potential issues as to why it's doing what it's doing and if it could be actually fixed. So thank you guys for watching. I don't know, I don't make these videos as often as I do because I used to do because of the podcast that I normally do. But let me know in the comments what you liked or disliked about the video, and if you liked it, that would be appreciated. Let's start it off. There was an interview that was super interesting regarding the Dirt developers, and a lot of misconceptions about what the PlayStation 5 can do and what the actual Series X can do as well. But let's talk about the particular problems. So it's been kind of unanimously used that the SDK or the GK, whatever the fuck Microsoft is doing, GDK, I guess is what it's called, was undercooked, underdeveloped, and that was one of the reasons why like the developers didn't have enough time to mess around with the development kit programming language. And there was some interesting things said about that. One of the things was that it's not undercooked, for starters. A lot of the features from that is actually embedded into, this new GDK that Microsoft has actually employed. The reason why they even employed it in the first place is so their games could scale between all of their consoles, including last generation and this generation, plus the S. People were kind of afraid that this was going to mean that, well, it's possible that the games are going to be kind of shortchanged because it's focusing on an older system. And really nowadays, with these engines being so complicated at the moment, there's things you can turn on and turn off, and you should be fine. If you want any kind of granularity, there's small tweaks, but there's nothing that that really would impact you. So he goes out to say, which I'll have these quotes later on, that that's not the issue. So what is the issue? There were some things said in the past about the C units, the compute units that are in the Series X. You can't feed them all with the bandwidth that is provided, especially that it has like a split RAM. That's a big problem. The RAM is actually split, which is kind of hella annoying. There is that. And not only that, it's harder to kind of make all of those CU same, which is about 52. So that was a large issue. Um, so that was this. And then if it's not the CUs being fed all together, then it must have something to do with the bandwidth, or something to do with the actual clock speed of the CUs and things of that nature. Most of the comparison videos that you will see on Digital Foundry or what is it, NX Gamer, and just other places seems to be GPU limited, which a lot of people were kind of thinking like, is it the GPU that's causing the issue? And it shouldn't be because it's a 12 teraflop GPU. And what I believe is this is what Mark Cerny was, he's a developer and he's spoken to other developers. So he wanted to double check on his work when it came to what really should happen. These people at Microsoft are not really developers on a frontline basis, and they're not looking to, utilize numbers for selling points either. What Mark Cerny did is he went out and asked these people, what do you want? And they found out that memory was a huge limiter, not just the bandwidth, but it stalling out and being hung up on certain different places. And they wanted to get rid of all these little places that could be possibly hung up. We had this huge discussion on Twitter. It is very possible that these bottlenecks that will typically be in these systems was the memory, and that it's possible that this is the biggest hindrance. And the Series X is just not powerful enough to, actually, punch through it. Before we go into this particular interview, and I'll read everything that's from that interview, just for your listening pleasures of listening to my silky smooth voice. And the problem with this is that well, I mean, the way I see it when it comes to these numbers and why PlayStation is really punching above its weight supposedly is that I mean, really memory constraints. Little caches for the GPUs probably not as large, which is causing these particular issues. Will they get better with a better GDK? Probably not, because as much as they are improving the GDK for the Microsoft system, the same thing is going on with PlayStation. And really none of these systems are being used to their maximum. Anyway, you look at it, and no matter how you slice it. So that's the thing there. So let's get into this interview, so you won't have to find it and read it. It's actually, I'll tell you where it would be from. Now remember, this is the conception that the GDK for Microsoft system, the environment for development, is the definitive factor. That's the reason why we have issues that the developers didn't get it in time and shit like that. So this is from the developer's mouth. There's a lot of misconception on Twitter. There's a lot of misprints on this interview. I believe I got this from. So here's what the interview starts off with, right? They go ahead and they kind of tackle that misconception about the GDK being like undercooked. So the question here is, are Microsoft tools a bit further behind than Sony's? I think that's what was being said. I mean, I wouldn't say that, is what David said from the developer at Dirt. But I think that depends on your experience and of which platform is primarily your focus. So we are pretty divided studio in terms of the individuality. With our natural platform, where do we go? Because we are a multi-platform the studio. So thinking about tools and everything coming in a bit hot, so these platform holders are trying to figure out what's the best way of delivering the best experiences to the developers, to the consumers, and provide all future sets. So a question was, I'm hearing that the GDK is basically in its infancy. There is a lot of stuff in it on the table. In its infancy, this is what David said, because it's new, but it's not particularly lacking. Like bare bones, it was the question. David goes ahead and he says, it's not bare bones. They brought a lot. No, most of the tools over from the SDK in terms of familiarity and how it works. In fact, stability and speed improved a lot on the GDK, which means it's better than what they had before. So really, shouldn't be any problems. So, okay, but yeah, I'm happy with it. If anything, there's very small things I would like. I have weekly meetings with Xbox, and my account manager gets a lot of feedback from me. I'm actually very happy for it. For me, the big thing in game development is not are my tools really amazing. Of course, this is really important. But how is my relationship with the teams who deal with? How are they are able to take feedback and how they are able to help me out, and all of these things help me out and make a better video game. So they're even getting help from Microsoft, and it's still looking the way that it's looking. The next thing that's talked about is the power difference between the two. So the question was, I'm expecting the Xbox Series X to go further than the PS5 as the generation goes on. We can talk about things like raw specs. That is the big divide, he says. A couple of things I don't understand. That's a significant power divide, no? David goes ahead and says, it really depends, though. Let's go back to the scenario where two teams at AMD get split off. There's a conversation happening between the teams and the consumer and Sony or Microsoft, and Sony says, look, we want this thermal throttling thing. How far is it going to push the hardware? Because now you have so many hardware threads on a CPU, you can churn out with a very fast code. And that leaves me with a lot of headroom to overclock the GPU and how much further it's going to go. And the optimizations for that might be different because of the layouts of the CUs on the Xbox Series X in contrast. So I'm just not sure. They can't really say exactly what's going on because they're still in NDA and they don't want to ruin the relationship or expose some things that doesn't need to be exposed. The bottom line is this: you can go check out the dealers' YouTube channels and that Xbox thing I just said before. You can go ahead and check that out. At the end of the day, this narrative about the actual software, which Microsoft is a software company, so they know better than Sony how to churn out the shit. Keep in mind that Microsoft showed their console almost a year before PlayStation. I should say probably like 6 months. It was around 6 months. They showed their actual console, and they still weren't ready. Like, what's really going on? You really got to take off that fanboy hat. I mean, there's more going on to it. Now, I'm not saying that the PlayStation 5 is more powerful. I'm saying that in its own right, is going to do some things better because of the architecture that was chosen. So if you were a fanboy, you expecting a complete blowout, well, I mean, you're going to be really disappointed. And even if this is taking off my fanboy hat, even if the Xbox Series X turns out better games, even if it does this, it's still on paper more powerful than the PlayStation 5, which means it's doing what it's supposed to do. It was always supposed to be better, you know? So when you go on Twitter and people are just kind of laughing at the situation, it's because of all the stuff that you provoked the year prior. It was supposed to be on paper faster. That's the conundrum. Why is the PlayStation 5 in general with a slower bandwidth and less CUs and you know what I mean, a slower teraflop count? Why is it worse? Ask yourself that question. It's not an SDK or a GDK. It's none of that shit. You need to do your research like hardcore. I would do research, to be honest.